Okay, I think we're situated here. Yep, looks like all systems go. Welcome everyone to the Keshe Plasma Reactor group for Tuesday, March 20th, 2018. Busy times, busy day today. Lots of things going on. Lots of action out in the world. It's exciting times we live in. And here we are in the Keshe Plasma Reactor group, where once again we gather together to talk about various topics that are related to the teachings on the Keshe technology and the plasma science. Plasma science. What is plasma? That's a big question. Plasma is what you make of it. Okay, so as usual, I like to start by asking if anybody has something in particular they'd like to present to get things going here. I don't see Lee Coates available, so a couple of people are attendees. I'll promote you to a panelist, and let me get my just want to get this set up so the chime doesn't keep chiming. There we go. Okay, so as I was mentioning, does anybody have anything they'd like to present right off the bat here? Maybe that new flying car that you have in the garage that you've been working on, and it'd be a great time to present that now. Which reminds me, we might see a little bit of, just a little hint, we might be hearing some information about flying cars tomorrow. That's going to be a topic of discussion, I believe, in the Knowledge Seekers workshop. So we'll see. For many of us in the plasma group, that was one of our dreams. Got us together to start with was the idea of a flying car. And in fact, Mr. Keshe was discussing a bit about that, how they had taken our Mercedes, which actually belonged to Caroline, and taken the motor out and so on, and we're preparing it for conversion to the Keshe positive positioning system when all heck broke loose in Belgium, and they were no longer able to carry on business as usual, you might say. Okay, thank you, Thomas. He says later he might have something. He has a couple printers going on beside him right now, so he's apparently hard to talk. Anybody else who has anything they'd like to bring forward? Any questions or comments or projects or ideas?
Hello, Ray.
Hello, just a minute, Mr. Jam. Just realized I don't have my headphones on, so we might get an echo in live stream if people talk here. So.
Hello, Ray. How are you?
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr.
I have
Chen.
something to show you because this is Vietnamese on Vietnam. They have done. They have sent on the Keshe Foundation of Vietnam to show what he have done.
Okay.
Because he is my student. He's very clever.
Yeah.
Now I share screen.
Yeah, go ahead. Are you able to there? I think you can.
This is 1 minute. I have to take.
Yeah, take your personal stuff off.
Yeah. This is Vietnam. KF Vietnam International. He have sent in on.
Right.
That is what he have done. Last time I had show you about only one spheroid here and one spheroid here. But he have a new idea. He makes 3 spheroids. In Vietnam, there one guy he can see the field of the plasma, and after he do this way, he says this is very, very, very strong. Because you see, if we have three spheroids here, he make like a reactor. You see?
Yeah.
And he make a little hook on the basement on the to make the GANs.
To make GANs?
Yeah, he nano-coat before, and after he make GANs.
Okay. And what's the hooks? Oh, the hooks are to hook onto the side of the container or to hook onto a string or something?
I want to show you.
Okay.
And I show you this after. There, you see the way he have done. He puts a spiral here, and he make a 2 hook, and he hangs the zinc plate here, 2 zinc plate. And he sees in the guy who can see the plasma, the flux of plasma. He says it is very strong, and he have against. You see?
Is the copper's in the water too, right? The copper part of the wire where or is it above water?
Yeah, it's over the
it's
water.
Just attached to the zinc directly to the zinc.
Yeah. They hang. You see, they have two lines of zinc to hang the plate only.
And this hasn't been nano-coated though, right? The copper?
Yeah. The copper with nano-coating. And
maybe it's a fire nano-coating.
He have nano-coating. His way he have nano-coating. He make water for nano-coating. What he says is this is a water of ash. He make ash of the seaweed.
Seaweed, yeah.
He make an ash of seaweed.
Right.
It's very, very, very strong. And he nano-coating the piece with the water of ash of the seaweed. He put like he make like he make them put them on the water of the seaweed, and after he put on the bottle and he make nano-coating under the sun.
I see. Interesting. Did he when he made his like that's how they make what's called caustic lye?
No, I didn't make caustic. He make with the ash of the water.
That's what I'm saying. Is that's how you can make caustic lye? They call it lye, Lye, and it is caustic. It's sodium hydroxide. But you usually use certain kinds of wood, and you would tend to, or wood ash, like you were saying, it's the ash from the seaweed in this case. And usually you would boil it down and filter it to make it quite strong. And I'm wondering if he did that, or did he just sort of mix the ash in with the water, and did he use hot water when he did the nano coating process, or is this a cold water process?
He put only all the cold water because if it's hot, he have a little bubble. He's put only on the cold, and after he make nano coating. But when he do this one, he doesn't hit. I have to say to them because this is just 14 hours only, very new.
Yeah, it's hard to get a good nano coating without using
Yeah,
the heat
if
initially.
I want to say to them to put on the bottle and tie it put very tight and put on the hot water to accelerate the speed of the nano coating, and
Yes,
that's
right.
better,
Yeah,
like what I have done before, because he put only on the uh, cold condition only.
right. Okay.
This is very interesting. Because the guy he can see the the flow of the plasma. He says this is very strong because you see on two sides we have two reactor like a reactor.
Yeah, two groups of three rings of
Yeah.
three loops in each ring as well. So
Yeah.
it's two
He,
groups of
he,
three times
yeah.
three.
Yeah. He say when he have it was nano coating, he puts the hand over the thing. He feels the feel of the plasma.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Why I say to you.
And what's the purpose of the smaller, thinner coil that hangs off the center there? What's the idea with that?
This one.
Yeah.
This one, he say when he puts this one makes the flow of the plasma to regularize two sides because he put this one on the middle. You see,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wondered
he
what
makes
the purpose was there.
the flow of the plasma between two boxes is very regular, more
Okay.
regular.
Yeah.
I think he say with this way the gains he receives is very strong. And you see, the first one, he just take a line of the seaweed. Is not but it's not dangerous for the health of the man, and it is useful for the health. And second one, he put outside.
Okay. Is this what we're seeing here is salt water then, or this is
Yeah, it is.
salt water, right?
No,
There's
this was
no.
and one more thing. When he this is salt is the sea salt. He have make on the fire
Oh
to
yeah,
make fire.
from salt water, seawater that he
The
boiled down.
seawater. I know a sea salt. A sea salt, and he make dry on the under the fire. Yeah, like
Okay.
he cook a little bit. He fry a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, and he make this salt become stronger.
Okay.
Before to put on the water to make a gas.
Okay. Well, interesting techniques and
Yeah, very
interesting.
interesting. Before I saw him, only one spiral on two sides. Now he have an idea to make three spiral. I think it's very clever. I think,
Yeah,
and
it's
he
nice.
on the middle this one too. And he says again, he have is very, very strong.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Chen on this, or ideas?
Now what I have idea I can send him to do for me. Before I say what I thinking is very interesting, but nobody help me.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know.
Well, it's good because he's obviously good at turning wire. He's, it's very nicely done coils and so on, so
Yeah.
that's important.
And after this one, I have to give him more ideas. He do for me, and he send on the KF when I'm KF.
And how does he test the fields? Does he feel the
I say
fields
he have.
with his hands?
I say he have one guy he can see the field.
He
Why
actually
when we,
sees the fields. He doesn't feel them, but he sees them. Is that right?
yeah, and he have his hand. He can receive the the strength of the field with his hand.
Oh, okay, with his hand. So it's both his eyes and his hand then.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I maybe this weekend I can contact with him to have more information.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is a Vietnamese guy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They have contact with this guy about 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This is the
Right.
first thing they have done.
Okay, and this group, the Vietnam, it's called KF Vietnam International. Is that the name of the
Yeah.
Facebook group? People want to check it out.
But my students are only seeker only. We only care seeker. They are not a student of private student of the Keshe
Right.
Foundation.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I have teach them. I have show them, and they do very fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They realize at what I have thinking. This is a good thing.
Do you find more younger people or older people in Vietnam are
He have
interested?
only 24 years old, a young one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is what some people find, that the young people are interested in the ideas of the Keshe Foundation, and in some countries it's the older people that are interested, and the young people are just not into it really.
Rick,
But it
they have one
depends.
thing. We have to have two kind of people. One kind they have experience is old people, and the young one they learn faster than old people.
Mm-hmm.
But this week I can organize one group of in Ho Chi Minh City for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have too much student under my in my class.
Okay.
Over 2,000 students on my class, and I
2,000.
recruit them on the same city to realize their dream.
To realize pardon me, their dream? Is that
Their
what you're saying?
dream, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to show them what I have learned and what I have learned and what I am thinking for the new technology, and
Mm-hmm.
they realize what I do is for the what I say
benefit.
For the humanity only.
Right, for the benefit of others. Um, an interesting question came up in the One Nation, One Planet, One Race for World Peace group, and the idea is that what is it about your country or your nation that could be contributed to the greater whole, for the benefit of the planet and for the benefit of all the benefit of humanity, let's say. I'm wondering what in particular, what do you think Vietnam has to offer that is special, that no other country can offer, that's something special with Vietnam? You got any ideas on that, Mr. Chin?
Yes, you see, I'm a Vietnamese. You need all my ideas about cash foundation. When the first time I learned, I say I'm very interesting. They have, I say the Vietnam people is very clever. I know that. I am one of them, and I try to to enter in the cash foundation on Seeker. You see, every time I have a new ideas for the group, and now I am organizing for the Hanoi and the Ho Chi Minh City and also other city to have a cash group for Vietnam. I say them to enter. Who want to enter is choose of each one. But the technology, what I have learned, I show them. I show them with the easier way, like to make a nano coating, like make a yes. My way is easier to do. What I say to you, I don't put on the NIOS on the hot water because it's very dangerous. The first one. Why I say I improve to put only on the cold nano coating, and I put them on the tiny bottle to accelerate the nano coating. Is the best way because the condition to nano coating, they have some condition. First one is the temperature. Second one is the pressure of the atmosphere. But the mostly nobody use the pressure of the atmosphere to make the layer of the nano be deeper. You see the beef stick. You want to be well cooked. You put on the steam. This is the best way. And the nano coating in the same way. We put on the high pressure. The layer of the nano coating be thicker. I say false many times, but nobody understand. The condition.
You done tests on it to see whether it conducts electricity or not on the coating? It should be a perfect insulator. For example, with a good nano coating, you should be able to put your hand on it even when there's power going through, like household power going through the wire, the bare wire.
Yeah,
you can actually
what I have done when I put on the steam is very strong, and the layer is very thick, and I say the condition to the layer of the nano coating is on the last step when we have to make the layer be stronger and be harder. We have to polarize with the voltmeter, and after we try it slowly, and we put them under the sunlight, and the nano coating become very hard.
Under sunlight, you say?
Yeah, under sunlight.
Yeah, I've done that technique.
On the good condition.
I've done that technique, and it works really good
Yeah,
with a
I
little bit
have
of
present
caustic.
too much time, but nobody understand. Nobody
Well,
do. I
thing,
say I have people do, but they don't
well,
present.
you would have to test it out because that technique has not been recommended by Mr. Keshe and
Yeah, but I
Armin and
know because you have only.
other people that have been working with this technology for years and years. They don't
Yeah,
recommend doing the cold,
yeah,
just a
yeah,
cold vapor. That you need to do that hot dip in order to
yeah.
get the
But
nano coating really to go in deep and
yeah,
get the
yeah.
atoms to pull up.
Because
So
the
we would
condition
have
of the cold nano coating to put them on the heat and on the high pressure. One
how
thing
do you do high pressure?
nobody. You see, when you put on the plastic box, you cannot close it tightly.
Right.
I put on the bottle of the plastic and I tie it very strong. The pressure when I put on the high temperature, the pressure inside raise.
But
It's very different.
how do you get high temperature? Do you do a steam, you mean in the steam process, or how do you get the
Yeah,
temperature if
yeah.
you're
I
not
put on
using
the hot
boiling
water
water?
only. I put only on the hot water, the inside of the bottle, the pressure raise itself,
Okay, yeah.
and the make gas too. We have to put on the pressure. The gas become better because the pressure is the one condition of the to accelerate the reaction of everything for
Yeah,
cooking for everything.
some
But
people
but
have
uh, but
used
uh, until now nobody do with under the pressure. You see?
well, that's not true at all. Lots of people use pressure cookers and other means of
Yeah,
putting
yeah,
pressure in the system, so
yeah,
you're not the first to think about that.
yeah.
But it is a consideration. It is one of the
And not
variables that we
consideration.
need
This
to.
is a technique of the physical. Because on the physical we have some condition. The first is the temperature. Second one is the pressure, and after is the energy of the light. We have to respect these three conditions. Good, the uh, the way we do become better only. You see anywhere to make a chemical, to make everything they put on the pressure. They they measure how many millibar to on the pressure uh, on the chemical production.
Hmm.
Why? Because I'm a physician. Everything we have a condition of the physics to realize. A plasma gas is all is enter in the matter because why they have to apply the condition of the matter. It's better. What I think. But I think really this is a good way to make a pressure on the way to make a nano coating and the gas and everything.
Yep, you just got to be really, really, really careful with pressure and caustic because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a very, very dangerous combination. So,
Not very, but you
oh
see,
yeah, it is.
you can make
That's
a
what
pressure
kids do.
with a little pump,
There's
pump on the wheel pump only.
a what?
Don't put on the autoclave. It's very dangerous. I know.
Yeah, you don't want to be using, especially an aluminum pressure cooker with caustic because you're creating hydrogen gas then, and it
Yeah,
can be
yeah.
explosive.
But you have to control the pressure only. And this is we have something to learn for the new way only.
Hmm. Okay, well, it remains to be tested, and we need to have a means of testing the nanocoating in a more thorough and professional way. Like it'd be
Yeah,
nice to have a means to get a good image relatively
yeah,
cheaply of what the nano coating looks like on the nanoscale. Or it'd be good to do some electrical tests that are standardized and we know how to take the test to determine the resistance, for example, of the nano coating. So there are things we could do to try to standardize our tests. But thanks for bringing up some interesting points there.
yeah. And one more thing. The next week I'm on the
Private teaching?
they say they on the Monday morning lah.
Okay, on the
The
private
class on the
teachings.
no, on the Monday morning you have a
Oh, the
class.
exploring plasma science, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, great.
they say about growing of the plant, but you know in America the agriculture have a big um, solution for every plant with the condition when the first day they put on the uh, uh, sheet to grow, and each time they have to put the fertilizer. Like the 10 first days, they have put what kind of fertilizer. When on the 3 months, how they put, and after just want to have fruit, they put the other fertilizer. They have make a
Mm-hmm.
very good
Yes. Right.
experience about this that one. You
Mm-hmm.
see, for the plant, when we plant the seed on the when
In the
to grow
earth.
the root, we have
Mm-hmm.
to put one kind of fertilizer.
Yeah.
If we take the root of the plant and we make the GANs with this GAN is very useful for the plant to grow up the root of them.
Mm. Okay.
It's an easy way because before in American they haven't no plasma and no gas. Now we have gas. Why we don't take the root and we get the uh, for the fertilizer? Make the gas from the root of the plant to make
Mm-hmm.
gas, and with this gas we make or put on the fertilizer of
Yeah.
the of
Yeah,
the thing.
that makes sense. Sure. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes does make sense.
and after the body of the plant we take to make against two, and after we take a leaf to fertilizer for the leaf and the flower and the fruit. You see, each element we make against of this element to grow up the plant in the good time. You do know what I say? For
No,
for
say that last
for
thing
grow
again.
Yeah, for grow up the root, we take the root of the to make gas.
Mm-hmm.
The
So
trunk, we get the trunk to make the gas. For the leaf, we take a leaf to make gas. And for the flower, we take a flower for make gas. And
I
for fruit,
see.
we take a fruit for make gas. And we
Yeah.
have each time we have a gas for growing the plant. This is
Right.
the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
way.
Well, that does make sense. Yeah. Be good to do some tests on that and see how it works out on
Yeah.
each stage.
Each stage, each time, and each part of the plant we have to grow up with a good condition. It with this condition, what I say. This
Mm-hmm.
is for the agriculture they do this way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be a great experiment to run, actually.
No, you see one thing. What I have here, I have a very good idea for them. what I have to share for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chen. There's a question from Jay who asks, it'd be nice to know how to wind the 3 coils like Mr. Chen is showing.
Yeah, 3
Is
coils.
there another coil inside the main bridging coil that goes across?
You see, if you see well that all of this coil, the spiral is only one stick of spiral, and you count how many
Oh,
how
I
many spiral,
see.
and you match it only.
So you're saying that it was all made in one continuous coil
Yeah,
to
one
start with,
continue,
and
and you
then
bend it,
you
and
bend
you
the
count.
ends down. Like, I see. Okay, that makes it much simpler.
Yeah, it's simple. Oh,
Okay, you don't have to wind the 3 coils in each end
no,
separately.
if
You
you
just
put a wide
wind them
trick,
all
you cannot do.
together.
You only make a one stick of a spiral, and you
Yep.
bend it only.
I see. Good. Thanks for clarifying that. And Jay says thank you too.
Welcome. Because about technical, I have too much ideas.
And Stephen in the chat says, thank you, Mr. Chen, for showing me the flower of life field connection you
Yeah,
teach.
yeah. You
So,
see,
there you go.
there's three spiral is a very alive flower of life. We have
Mm-hmm.
2 flower of life,
Mm-hmm.
and one more thing. Next week, I have sold to my student to make this part a flower of life too, to make stronger. Then we have 3 flower of life uh, in the same line. This you have make one. Now I say them to make 3 and bend them to have a flower of life on the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I under what I can see, I have a new idea, and I improve the technology of the gas foundation. You see, I say I have looked for the first time only 8 months or 9 months only until now. But every week I have a new improve. I say it's not my ideas. I have someone under me to teach me, but every night he teaches me. It's
Mm-hmm.
not my idea. I say this is a intelligence of the universe in the plasma. Really, I know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, any other comments or questions here? Just as an aside, I can remind people that it's good to update your Zoom. Sometimes the Zoom doesn't function properly when you try to do audio and so on if you don't have the latest updates. So there's a number of people that don't have the latest updates, including you, Mr. Chin, and Jay and Joseph and Space Dream. It indicates that you need to update your software at some point. You don't have to do it urgently right now, but it's always good. Zoom updates quite often, almost like once a week or something, so it's good to check in with your Zoom up in the upper left corner and go to check for updates and get that updated if you can. Alrighty, let's
Yeah, Rick, you
uh-huh.
know until now I use a Zoom on with a free Zoom.
The free Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I cannot update. I use a
Okay,
free Zoom only.
right. Well, you might want to get
When I put
um,
on the when I want to update, he say you have to pay $40 for a month or something, or
oh,
40.
that's to upgrade. That's different.
No.
That's not updating. That's upgrading. And that's different. That's to go to the next level, the pro level or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And you shouldn't have to do that. If you're teaching, and you're a KFSSI student, correct? Right, Mr. Chin,
Yeah.
you're a student, right? So you should be able to get hooked up to do teaching through the Zoom, and maybe talk to Vince about that if you can, and try to see if you can get a a private Zoom number that you can use that way. Unless it's working out okay for you so far
Yeah.
with the Zoom. Does it work okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's an option anyway. Alright, what else we got for show and tell here? I've got some little devices that came in the mail this week that I haven't really had a chance to play with, but maybe I'll set them up here and see what I can do. So what I've got is a handful of little plastic pieces. And a bunch of bags of mysterious pointy things. Okay. And it's kind of cool. So what it is these are little plastic funnels kind of thing. You can see though that it's got a very sharp pointy tip on it there. So a little bit better. So what we do is we take the this doohickey, try to hold it so you can see it, and these little doodads here are basically pieces of steel that are magnetic, so they're like a little compass. And you put that on the point, if you can see the point to put it on. It's a tiny little, am I doing it the right? Oh, I'm doing it backwards, no wonder. I won't go in the hole if there's no hole. So then I've got a little balanced compass needle here, which points to north-south, like a regular compass. But what's cool is I can now set up kind of an array, I guess you might say. So, like there's one, and there's another one, and there's another one. You can see how they're starting to line up. So I've got all these little guys, and what it is basically is a magnetic field detection system. That's the way I look at it anyways. So you can position these little guys around your project to be able to detect the magnetic fields that are going on in live, kind of live real time, rather than an instrument which can take a separate reading in each place. But this gives you an instant kind of visualization. One more of these goes in. Alrighty, so I've got my field detection set up here. I'm going to open up some of these other ones and get them set up. And you can sort of start to imagine some of the experiments that you could do with a simple system like this. This was very cheap. I think it was maybe $10 or something for the entire setup. It might have even been cheaper than that, I think. Got it from China. It took a couple of months to get here, but I'm already having fun with it. So it ends up these little magnetic needles, I guess you could call them, compass needles. They tend to interact with each other, which gets kind of interesting. Okay, two more. Alright, I'm going to set them up in kind of a grid. See what that does. I don't know if there's some recommended experiments with the setup or exactly how it works. So I'm just going to go with the seat of the pants method of playing with it as I go along, just to experiment and find out what it does. It's interesting that one will tend to influence the other ones. No doubt if we tighten up the configuration, they'll tend to, I think they'll tend to interact more. Maybe they'll just line up with and then just stabilize there first. This one's particularly sensitive. It's actually vibrating, shaking. Still shaking. Weird. Still shaking. Now it's just stopping. I think it's stopping. Still shaking. Yeah, that's a strange one. Whoa, that's cool. So you can see how this one's kind of dead. It's not working so well. I'm going to put that out on the corner. Maybe it needs a little bit of work to clean it up inside. I'll put this in here. See that this one here moved. Okay, so if I let them just settle out, they all of them except maybe this one. This one is being contrary. It's doesn't want to line up like the other one somehow. It's kind of odd the way that goes. I'm just going to get a magnet. There's a magnet. Got a little stack of magnets here. Just one. Oh, it's already influencing them from way out here. Let me just bring this over a bit. Kind of zero in a bit better. And let me reset the camera. I think somewhere around there should be good. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Got the magnet. Definitely it influences it from about, say, 8 inches away. And I'll double that to 16, see if there's any. Some influence from about 16 inches away. When we get in closer, of course, there's a strong influence. I want to see how the magnetic fields of electrons and protons spin from the ambient fields, perhaps. These are all electrons spinning, different speeds, different, a little bit different spins, and some of them really whipping around. Okay, that's pretty cool. Got a bigger magnet here. Of course, if you hold a magnet steady, then you get a direct indication of the magnetic field. It points. Whoops, that one just about leaped off of its pivot there. Well, we've got one. We've got one of these that is a contrarian. This one here, if you look at it, all of these other ones, whoops, it's a bit too strong of a field there. All of these other ones oops, I think, jeez. I think I made myself into a liar as I said that. Almost all of these are attracted to the red You can see the red has attracted all of these guys. This one, however, the white is attracted instead of the red. These guys, and this one here, the white is attracted instead of the red. Is that true on all the corners? No, not on that one, and not on that one. So all the other red ones are attracted, except this one and that one. They're contrary for some reason. I suspect they got, they weren't correctly magnetized. So you can see, I'll move it up closer here. You can see the white and red, and the magnet definitely affects the white, whereas the rest of these, it's the red that it's strongly affected. Maybe the magnet has already magnetized this. So perhaps there's a way I can magnetize this, maybe by stroking it to get it to remagnetize it properly. Well, that didn't work. Maybe I'll use the other pole. Try this. See, that's the one. Yeah, hey, that worked. So now these red guys are attracted to this pole, and this red one's attracted to this pole. So now they all have the same polarity, and it's just this guy here that's now contrarian. So I'll try to coerce this one to be, use the other pole and stroke it this way. That's what I did last time. Let's see if this works. Okay, that's the same pole. Yes, it did. So I was able to change the polarity of the poles on that magnet in order to reset it to the correct red and white configuration. Whoops, too close. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so, what have I got that could be measured? I wonder. I was wondering if my hand would have an electrical, or sorry, a magnetic field that could be detected by these guys. So let me just put my hand over it slowly and see what happens. First I'll try to go up close to it. Don't see any changes there. Now I'll try it horizontally. The other hand. Don't seem to have any magnetic influence on these that I can see. I just budged these ones so they moved. I don't seem to be too magnetic. Maybe I need to stroke my fingers with the magnet. Definitely gets them going from a distance. I wonder if that's actually possible to do, since the water in her hand is somewhat diamagnetic. It doesn't seem to influence though. That's makes sense. Didn't expect it to. I wonder if cell phone have any influence. Oh yeah, it is. So there's I think there's magnets inside of the cell phone perhaps, but definitely a fairly strong field there. Let me turn off the cell phone and maybe that'll make a difference.
Rick,
Yes?
Rick, on your cell phone you have a microphone. In the microphone you have a magnet.
Yes, quite possibly. See, the microphone, I believe, is right up in there. That's quite strong influence on that end. Let's try the other end. Definitely does it, but it's much stronger at the other end. Like you say, Mr. Chan, it could very well be the magnet in the speaker inside here. Okay, that's interesting. Doubt that my little crystal radio would do any influence. I wouldn't expect it to. It's got a coil inside, but it shouldn't be. Actually, it does have a piece of ferrite in there, but it's not actually magnetic until you put electricity through it. So that makes sense that that doesn't influence anything. I've got a nano-coated coil, nano-coated wire inside of as a sensor. See if that has any influence. No, can't see it doing anything. What else do we have to play with? Oh, I know. Plasma ball. Let's see if what that does. If I can get it going. Oh. I think its batteries might be. It may have gotten left on or something. Batteries are probably low. Oh, I got another one here though. I always have a backup plasma ball because you never know what can happen to your plasma ball. Okay, that's working. Okay, so here's my backup plasma ball turned on and everything. And you can see it better this way. I would say I'm pretty much getting a zero magnetic field, you could say. Let me put one hand on the plasma ball and the other hand trying to direct the not getting any reaction or anything from fields from myself. No, I don't see any action that way. Okay, so you can imagine I don't have my reactor set up handy, but I'll just use this as a sample. can imagine having some sort of rotating reactor set up, maybe in the middle of this, with these things around it, and you know, trying to notate the fields. We do know that when these reactors rotate, they definitely give off some sort of electromagnetic field from this that can be detected with this kind of sensor that I've shown before in this workshop several times. And I'm wondering if this rotating would be able to influence these little guys. We'd have to isolate the motor to make sure the motor electronics or magnetic fields are not influencing the magnets, and just like maybe having these mounted in such a way that they would be close to the peripheral part of this, which seems to have the strongest signal when I was taking the signal readings off of it when it's rotating. So that would be one good experiment to do. I don't have this set up to run right now, with I'm in the middle of rebuilding that setup, so that's not available. What else do we have to be able to demonstrate anything here? Let me see what else. Nano-coated coil. Wouldn't expect that to do anything either. Here's a quartz crystal in a nano-coated coil. Again, I wouldn't expect that to do anything, but you never know. Nope, nothing there. Well, anyway, at some point, this will be a kind of an interesting thing for a cheap way to detect magnetic fields. So I just want to show that. I'll have to try to look up the link. I can't do that right now, but how did I get it? I think it was through it's either Alibaba or one of the other. It's from a Chinese place. I think it might have been Banggood is the other Chinese distributor. If anybody's seriously interested in wanting a set of these, then get a hold of me and I'll get the link to you. I did want to try actually a ring magnet, a little ring magnet before we end this. Got a ring magnet here. Probably the same basic effect. Whoops. Too close. Right this way. Oops. Anyway, any other experiments with these things that someone can suggest? Or shall I put my toys away? I know I could influence it, but with my hand this way. Woo! My hand is magnetic. You don't see my other hand underneath the table with the magnet. Therefore, it looks like my hand is magnetic. Always watch the other hand. Okay, do I still have an audience, or did I lose everybody on this one? Well, there you have it anyway, such as it is. Maybe we'll see more of these little guys in the further experiment. Be handy to have when the Earth's magnetic field changes. You'll be able to sit here and see it happen live in real time. It's a real-time magnetic field detector. Actually, it's having a visual feedback like this is quite handy. Comes right down to it. For straight magnetic fields, we're not talking about plasmatic fields or maggrav fields or electromagnetic fields. These are strictly magnetic fields that are detected by these little pieces of metal on here. Such a basic, simple idea. Tiny little piece of metal. It's got a little brass cap on it, actually. The brass cap is where the needle goes in, and it's able to spin on the needle. Brass will spin better than steel that way. The steel would tend to bind because of the magnetic field from the pin and from the magnet and the pin. So this could also be a way of looking at the interconnection of, for example, hydrogen atoms in the universe, or other atoms. And if we were to consider that we're out in space with this setup, and if these were particles in space that were connected in a cloud, for example, of hydrogen gas, ionized hydrogen gas, essentially magnetic, then in theory you would think, if this thing would work the way you would think it would, you should be able to, I don't think it's going to work quite the way I hoped. I'd hoped to influence at one end and make them all you would think they sort of are doing that, but they're not all. Some of them are binding a little bit, like that one's binding. I'll pull him out. Well, I've got 4 of them interacting, maybe possibly 5. I see they have to be at exactly the right distance in order to communicate with each other, you might say. Alright, well, enough of that for now, I guess. Thought it'd be kind of fun to play with. Okay, what else we got? Anybody have something they'd like to present, show, talk about, discuss? Otherwise, have a look at. Stephen asks, do you think we can get 1 watt out of each compass? Or 1 volt, not watt, he says. Well, the trouble is, you could make a little induction coil and actually get some sort of input from it. A very tiny amount. And these are not strong magnets, and the hope of getting a watt of power out of each of these is not really reasonable, unfortunately. It's more an indicator of the fields rather than a generator. It just takes too much. If it was on a very large scale, a big chunky thing and rotating around with some coils around it, you could probably get some power out of it. But then you still have to manually rotate the thing, is the problem. So it's a loss of energy situation. Okay, let me think. What else can we bring up here at this point in time? I haven't had a lot of time today to prepare something for you guys, so I'm hoping that someone else would have something that we might work with. But is there any topics that somebody would like to have clarified or discussed, or some brilliant insights you might have on something? Or shall we call it a day, as they say? Show you another little project that arrived recently. Again, it's a cheapo thing, but could be kind of fun. This is a soldering together kind of kit, and it's got all the parts to make a miniature Tesla coil. You can see there's the coil there, the induction coil, and it's got some heavy-duty transistors and little circuit board and a bunch of LEDs and resistors and other stuff. And it makes a little miniature Tesla coil, generate tiny little sparks. But I'm thinking it might be a good way to generate the beat or the pulse that we talk about in our reactor systems. So if you had 2 of these, and I actually have 3 of them because I wanted to get three reactors set up and tune these to different frequencies, slightly different frequencies to each of them, and that will generate what's called a beat frequency in between. So if you have, for example, this one at oops, one of my parts dropped out. This one at I don't know, say I'm not sure what it would run at, but let's say it was at 1,000 hertz. It would be more like 100,000 or 200,000 or something like that. But let's say it ran at say 1,000 hertz. Okay, so and say we tune this one to say 1,010 hertz. then if you were to run these both together, 1,000 and 1,010, you would hear what's called a beat frequency, an oscillation, a pulse of about 10 hertz between them. Basically, you subtract the difference and you end up with that beat frequency. You can do the same thing with singing. People are singing together, but they're just slightly off key with each other, then you'll hear a beat frequency, kind of thing. Also happens, you can do it whistling. If two people are whistling, you have a been a while since I whistled. Kind of thing. You can whistle really loud with your fingers and so on, and generate a intense frequency. And if you have a friend beside you doing the same thing, and you can alter your frequencies just a little bit and start to generate a beat frequency, and you can actually alter that beat frequency anywhere from a slow pulse like a right up to kind of thing, depending on the difference between these two frequencies. Kind of like where they rub together, you might say. The resultant is the beat frequency. So we could take these Tesla coils, have a beat frequency between them, and maybe with tuning into some of the natural frequencies or natural harmonics that tend to exist in our ambient atmosphere, it might be possible to tune them in such a way that it produces an interesting pulse or beat frequency that, if we can time it just right, maybe there's a certain beat, a certain pulse that will help keep our reactor self-initiated, help it keep running by itself. For example, the pulse of the Earth being at least of the cavity between the Earth and their outer atmosphere, which is the Schumann resonance, approximately 8 hertz, a little less than that, 7.87 some say. Others say that it has risen in the last years, so it's now above 10 even. But somewhere in that around 8 hertz frequency seems to be a magic point. 8 hertz was what was used as the basis for, I believe it was the Pythagorean music theory. So 8 hertz and multiples of 8 would be your bass octaves. Anyways, yeah, so I was going to mention about that as well, about the frequency of the Earth, or what's called the Schumann Earth harmonic, but it's actually more the atmospheric cavity harmonic, 7.87 hertz, that is cycles per second, also happens to be our theta brainwave frequency. And theta is the interesting state that's sort of in between waking and sleeping states, but it's also where the psychics and shamans and people that are able to work with their higher mental apparatus operate out of the theta and alpha frequencies, alpha being above the 7.8 and below around 10 or 11 hertz. And then we have the beta frequencies, which are higher frequencies than the alpha and theta. And the beta tends to be more of our busy brain and our thinking, doing, running around, and running around like a chicken with their heads cut off, as we do as humans a lot of the time. So for inner peace, you go for the theta and alpha. Alpha is known for the for joy and for enlightenment and that kind of state. So, and when you think of music theory, what is music based on? It's different musical scales are based on either 8 or the 7.87 hertz ranges. So you have multiples of 8 or multiples of 7.87 to get the different octaves that are developed from those root notes. So it's interesting that even the ancients somehow knew that to base the music on the earth frequencies, the 8 being very close, possibly close enough, but I think 8 was more artificially developed later compared to the earlier developed music. Okay, what else we got going here? Awful quiet bunch here tonight. Not sure how to entertain you. You should be entertaining me.
I found Li Feng.
Okay.
Very interesting character.
And how do you have a Wikipedia link on that we could look at or something?
Oh, I don't know how to do that, but I did read a few pages on him, which were very interesting. They have hundreds and hundreds of different posters, starting from Mao and moving forward. And there was a little debate, I guess, whether he was actually a real person or somebody made up. But he did such wonderful deeds his whole life. I mean, he was a soldier. And when the troops came home from marching, he would wash their feet. He would darn their socks. If one of his buddies' house got flooded, he would take his pay and send it with them. And he just went all over the place and around the country and whatever he was doing in. And they made hundreds and hundreds of different posters. And now I guess he's evolving, kind of like Barbie or something.
Yeah, you see him here. You see him on this poster here, for example.
But apparently he was, with the red scarves. And he was, but he apparently there was an accident that happened when he was just 22. I think he lived from 1940, if he lived, but I think he did, 40 to 62, something like that.
Yes, right. And he died by a very strange accident where...
Very strange.
Do you want to tell the story?
Well, you know... I've only read it once, but apparently they were going to do some work on the pole, and Lee asked the guy to back up the truck. The back wheel of the truck got stuck somehow in the pole. The guy, not knowing, floored the truck, and it pulled the pole, which fell on Lee. And they took him to the hospital, and the guy was so upset because it was his best friend and everything. And apparently that's how he passed away. But there was a diary that they were talking about, like some of his writings or something that they were looking for. And I'm not sure if it was found or not. But yeah, a very heroic figure to the country. Into service, not only the country now, but a little different now. It's kind of evolving, or the figure's evolving into something a little bit more modern and not just serving the state under Mao or something like that. But it's a beautiful figure. beautiful figure, and Mr. Keshe has been given an award, I understand.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how the award works into this guy here. Like, it says he lived from December 1940 to August 1962. Was a soldier
Yeah.
in the People's Liberation Army and so on, and he was like a model citizen. They talk
Totally.
about,
Totally.
and it was all used for propaganda, of course, to try to get people to toe the line and be loyal to the state and loyal
Mm-hmm.
to the rest of the people that you're supposed to be loyal to and whatnot. And just trying to see how the award comes in. There's
But I mean, to wash the other soldiers' feet after the battle or after the march, jeez,
mm-hmm.
this guy was
Right.
total service to others.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing an award here. There should be an award that's part of this
They didn't
whole
have
deal.
anything about the award in the I guess he said that there's only been 5 people outside of China that have received this award, and it's an international ambassador for peace. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm think that's the same reference that Mr. Keshe is talking about, but I'm not sure because there's actually um, there's another spelling of a different thing. How'd it go? Um, Feng. Feng was. Yeah, that's it. Li and Feng, it's called, which is a global supply chain manager for U.S. and
Yeah,
EU brands
th-
and different things, commercial
I saw
sales and
that the other
whatnot.
day too, and that's why I got confused. I said, "Gee, it's not a company he's talking about." I thought it was like Confucianism or Taoism or one of these other isms, but it's actually a person.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to find out a little more about that. Maybe we can find out on Thursday from Mr. Keshe and try to get. Let me see. There's an official website. Let's have a look at that.
Well, remember how we used to have G.I. Joe, but he was more of just a war guy. And this guy served the nation as well as served apparently everyone he came in contact with.
Like here's the Li and Feng Foundation, for example. I'm not sure if that's the same thing. It might be just totally different. So.
I
Um,
went on one of the web with the link there, and it was in Chinese, where they're doing his memory or all his stuff. So, and then the other link wouldn't connect. It said invalid something, user or something like that. But yeah, it's
yeah.
quite a phenomenal, and to depart at such a young age, but beautiful example, like a total giver.
Yes, right. I guess that's the main point with
Right.
that. And I'm not sure
Mhm.
how the award works into it, but we'll find out more about that from the horse's mouth, as they say.
I had a few ideas for you, but I don't know what I did with them. Just about, I mentioned the tutorials, the little things like that, um, periodically.
Okay, thanks for your input, Mark. Anybody else? Or are you going to stay quiet out there today?
Where's Guy, by the way?
I'm not sure. Sometimes he comes by on Tuesdays and sometimes not. He might be working and he gets pretty busy sometimes.
To disturb the quietness, I could show some projects of mini reactors, but they are on the way. It's not a finished project. I could share my screen and show some
Sure.
motors and bars.
That'd be fine, Joseph. Please go ahead.
Okay. Do you see the photo with two motors and two syringes?
Yes, they're either giant syringes or tiny motors, one or the other, right? Are they?
Yes.
How big are they? It's hard to tell with the picture.
Just a moment. I need to measure.
Is the syringe maybe 2 centimeters thick, or?
It's these are I think the 20 milliliter syringes. But I have some more photos. I used this tiny part at the front of the syringe to make
Oh, I see. Yes,
the motor
yes.
and the bar.
Okay.
And I glued them together. It was like it's a plastic tube. And it was perfect. It is perfectly fitting on the motor. You see, on the motor is a Zahnrad, such a metal thing that can drive something.
A cog sometimes, or gear.
I put it up there and filled it with a high temperature silicone. And that has good. Some good things because it needs 3 days to harden out, and so you can adjust it really easy. And I have glued them with this high temperature silicone, and on these little tubes of the syringe, the bars got away. They are flying away at 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. That wasn't the best idea.
Yeah,
so I took other motors. These are the best motors because they are very cheap. I think €2 or $3 one piece, and they are very small too. And I found the 2 milliliter syringes that are perfectly fitting on there. And I cutted them, and I cutted the syringe and filled up the whole thing in there, the tube of the front part of the syringe with this high temperature silicone. And this worked relatively well. But at the shaft, there was some weakness because at higher RPM speeds, the shaft wasn't stable. And the bar got spinning left and right. And so I decided that I make at the thinner shaft part, at the thinner tube at the shaft, I glued them with a 2 compound glue. That's
okay, like an epoxy, they call it. Epoxy, right? That would be epoxy, right?
Yes, exactly, epoxy.
Yeah.
And but only this thinner part, and the thicker part of the syringe, a little bit right, I glued with the high temperature silicone because the glass bar is better glued with the high temperature silicone. I could also use the two compound epoxy, but I wanted to get some buffering of the material.
Right. Yep.
And I made with 3 of these motors, I made a mini star formation. It's just a wooden plate that is round cut out, and I have glued in there 3 of the motors. I have to search if I have, yes. This is the other side of these motors. I have put every positive pole I put together to one, and every negative pole. So every motor is getting the same speed. But I have a new version, and I'm working at this version because I will use 3 potentiometers, 3 adjustable resistors to get every motor on different speeds, because I think the gravitational ganses need a little bit lower speed, and the magnetic one, the CH3, a little bit higher speed, because somehow to get the free plasma exactly in the middle, balanced in the middle.
Okay.
And I don't know if I have, no, I have no photo. This is the down part of this thing, and this is the upper part. And I want to make, I don't know how it's in English. It's in German called Gips. It's a powder, you put water in there, and after some time it gets hardened. And I wanted to put this white powder with the water and some ganses, and put these motors in there. So the motors are in this white thing that gets hardened, so the vibrations are not affecting that much. So I can drive higher RPM speeds. And it's functioning very good with the high temperature silicone. If the ball is not glued in the right way and have many vibrations, I can take this ball away and cut the high temperature silicone off from the ball, and also get the high temperature silicone out of the syringe, because it's polypropylene.
Right.
And it's very cheap, and I wanted to get lithium-ion accus in there, some lithium batteries in there.
Oh, yes.
I found at eBay, at the China store, for $2 or $3, I found a lithium charging circuit, and I wanted to make it with a USB, because the handy batteries, they are, each one of them has 10 watt hours, and one of the motor at higher RPM gets maximum 300 milliampere. And so I can drive with this handy accus 2 or 3 days if I put 3 or 4 of them together. And it's very cheap and easy to build. You only have to have patience at the balls to glue them, but the whole thing with the batteries, with the charging circuits, is about 40 to 50 euro, the whole thing.
Right.
But it's not ready at the moment. I will make it, I will finish it. I don't know how long it takes that I get from China the charging circuits and the batteries and adjustable resistors that I can drive the motors with different RPM. And if it's ready, I will show it, but it needs some time.
Right on, Joseph. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes.
It's fun making things spin. It's a challenge though. You're always having to. It seems like we're always having to sort of jerry-rig things, as they call it, and adapt over shafts, and it's typical to have to come up with something like you did in order to join that shaft onto some sort of cup arrangement that can support the ball. And that's a bit of a challenge, to say the least.
Yes,
They don't
I've
make such
tried
things on the internet.
I've tried some bigger balls and bigger motors, but it gets fairly expensive.
Yes.
And so I found out I got these mini motors donated, and I had these little glass balls donated, and I found them very cheap in the internet. And so I thought I'm making these units, these little small units, because they are cheaper, and I don't need so much money for the experiment.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It depends on how much you run the equipment too. If you're running it every day, um, it can put the wear and tear on bearings and shafts and so on, and you end up with sloppiness, and then the motors start to run noisy, and that can be quite irritating if you have noisy motors. But and then of course it costs more to have quieter motors. And the hard drive motors are nice. They do rev up and they go at quite high speeds, but if your system is a little bit out of balance with the hard drive motors, I find it destroys the motors in pretty short order. Just seems to seize up the bearings in the motor, and they don't really overheat as such, but the bearings just suddenly seize up. So you're spinning along great, and you finally got all your 3 or 4 reactors going at once, and then all of a sudden one stops. You go, what? And you get that one fixed and all back together, and another one stops, and so on. So that's where the higher quality does pay off in the long run. And sometimes it takes a while to experience several sets of motors to find out that the higher quality ones will last longer and so on. It's not always the case though too, so you have to be careful.
Yes, but if you take the cheaper motors and smaller balls, the bearing are lasting longer.
Yeah.
And if you take lower RPM, it lasts much longer.
Yeah, that's right. So, but people like me, I like to push the limits, and as soon as I get a new device, I usually like to find out how fast it can go and how balanced it is, and is it going to be suitable, and how long will it last, and all those factors. So I can be a bit hard on equipment sometimes, but I like to see things spin. But I'd like to see them spin quietly, because it can be really annoying after hours of a noisy apparatus that has to run for several days for an experiment, for example.
Yes, I can show you one motor that is spinning, because you wanted to see something spinning.
Sure.
I would like to open my video.
Okay, might have to allow that. Let's see. I think you should be allowed. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I have to do another change down here. There we go. Allow panelist start video.
Okay, I will close the microphone because the motor is noisy, or I'll show you the sound and close it afterwards.
Okay.
This motor is spinning on, I think, 6,000 or 7,000 RPM or 6,000 RPM.
Yep,
and it is quite stable.
Yeah.
This is with this high temperature silicone.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have a bit of a buzzy noise, but not too bad, and everything goes good until what happens is when you fill it with GANs, and then that's when the true test comes in. Will it
Yes.
will it keep stable, or will it tend to destroy itself? Especially if you put a GANs ball inside of the ball. So you have a double core or triple core reactor, and that can be really hard on the bearings because the inner ball often will go to one side of the outer ball and kind of produce an egg-shaped rotation kind of thing. With it just won't be stable. It's hard to make that center ball center itself in a two-core reactor without a pin or some other means to keep it stable.
You have to be careful in spinning it up at some frequencies, at some rotation speeds. It gets unstable, and it's really important how slow you are going to the higher speeds.
True, yes. I witnessed that in my, in fact, I think we showed it last week with the bubble in the middle video that I have. Yeah, I think we showed it in, actually in the Exploring Plasma Science video. So let me see if I can find it here.
Well, while you're doing that, Rick, did you ever give an overview of those magnets? Was that you working with those magnets that were kept repositioning themselves in the plastic?
The magnets in the plastic?
Yeah, were they? Remember, you rubbed your hand on it, and
Yeah,
then they
that
just
wasn't magnets. That was electrostatic action, actually, or what's
Oh,
called
okay.
electrostatic.
Okay.
They were styrofoam balls with aluminum foil wrapped around them, and just one rub of the hands is enough to keep them going for quite some time. It's quite an amazing.
They sure
thing,
look like
actually.
they had intelligence.
Yeah. Okay, let me get this video lined up here, and then maybe I can do a demonstration of the ball phenomenon.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, what happened to it? Where'd it go? There we go. Alright, let me see what we got here. It's almost 5 minutes altogether, but it's probably 5 minutes of me not talking is worthwhile. So I think I'll just let it play through, and maybe I'll make some comments as we go through. I'm not sure if I think so. Let me get it lined up here first. Okay. Okay, I think you should be able to see that video. I don't see the outline of the video. Oh, I have to resume sharing. There we go. Okay. I think you can see it there now. Okay, I'll play the video. Now, first I'll note, if you see my arrow on the screen here, and you can see the bubble. There's a tiny little bubble right at the tip of the arrow. and that's what we'll be watching in here. And you'll see the transitions, like you're just talking about, when the RPMs are raised or lowered, then there's a turbulence, a transition turbulent period during those RPM changes. And the ball, you'll see the resultant action of the ball there when that happens. So we're running at just a few hundred RPM here now, and you see the ball is very stable. It's not bouncing around, or it's just my camera work that's bouncing around, which it does do. I wish I had the tripod set up for this video. Sorry about the bouncing around, but I wanted to get different angles of this rotating sphere. And the thing about it is, okay, so now you have an increase in speed. You see it's bouncing, the ball, little bubbles bouncing around in there. And again, with the rotation, and then it stabilizes shortly after. A few seconds it takes to stabilize the vortex inside. It's a little blurry there now. There it is. So I had to run this apparatus sideways in order to keep the bubble in one position. I couldn't get it to do this with the apparatus vertical. Okay, another increase in RPM, another bouncing around of the bubble until it stabilizes again. And now you can start to see a Gans ring forming too. There's a little bit of Gans inside of this reactor. And how the bubble really made a sudden move there, jumped toward the front of the ball, and now it's become there. It's bounced around again and jumped into a different position, and then it finds its positive positioning after a bit of stabilization time. And we're probably at about probably close to 3,000 RPM there now. The bubble jumps around a bit there with that increase in RPM. Then it becomes rock stable again. I mean, it's so stable you can't even tell that it's rotating in there. It is like at the center core of the center of rotation of this sphere. And that's basically it. The bubble goes up to the top of the rotating sphere after it comes to a stop. Actually, it came to a stop, and there's still the rotating vortex inside that kept the bubble going there for a while until the vortex stopped inside. And then the bubble went up to the top again. So that's kind of fun. It just shows the rotation, and of course with this apparatus it's interesting in that you can actually control the bubble with a needle through the side of the rotating sphere. This is a plastic sphere. It's possible to put in fact I've already done it, to put a septaseal it's called, so you can insert a needle through the septaseal and not disturb the vacuum or pressure inside the container. So that way you can actually use a needle to alter the gas inside of the tiny bubble. So you could create the kind of gas that you want for a particular reaction. Maybe you might want to use hydrogen and deuterium and tritium and helium and maybe some argon, neon and xenon, and so on, as part of your experiment, maybe in micro amounts for a tiny wee bubble, or for a series of bubbles. You can also do that, because controlling the spinning sideways like this enables one to have several bubbles going at the same time. I've done an experiment with that it's quite amazing, because once you have these bubbles separated, you could have 5 bubbles sitting in a row and they bump up against each other and they look just like that little bubble that we saw inside there. And you could have 3, 4, 5 of them, and they bump up against each other and they don't merge to form one big bubble. They tend to just bounce up against each other. It's the most incredible thing. They don't merge. They tend to separate, keep separate. And it's counterintuitive. You would think that two voidness bubbles, when they get close to each other, sort of like a soap bubble, they'll tend to stick to each other or merge or form a different bigger bubble or do something. But in this case they just bounce around in there.
Hi, Rick.
Hello Jalal.
What you learned from this experiment?
What did I learn from this experiment?
Yes.
Well, a lot of it was about this turbulence that's already been mentioned, and that every time that there's a change of the state of your experiment, like to increase or decrease the RPM, means you're adding energy or subtracting energy away from it, and it takes time to stabilize. And it's a bit counterintuitive to me. I wouldn't have expected it to take several seconds, sometimes up to 10 seconds or more, to stabilize the layers inside that are rotating in order to keep the ball from bouncing around in there. I thought, there's something about that. And now I also realized that there might be times when you want the ball to be bouncing around. So you might want to induce a particular frequency of bouncing, or a particular beat to the bounce of the ball. And you can
Isn't that showing independency of the guns?
Showing the what of it?
Independency.
Independency. Yeah, that would be possible to maybe have a demonstration of that in terms of the independency of the GANs. What are we measuring when we see a bubble? And say this is Gans water, then, and what if we didn't start with a bubble, an actual air bubble, but it came out of the liquid? In that case, the bubble would be composed of what? It could be air, for example. It could be just an air bubble, which would be normally oxygen and mostly nitrogen, actually. A little bit of argon, some other trace gases. Or the bubble could be vapor, the vapor from water or whatever other substance you might have in there can cause a vapor bubble, and especially under a low pressure condition. So if it was rotating really fast, the center is under low pressure and tends to create a voidness in the middle. Or it could be a real voidness bubble. It's the third option, in which case it's the free plasma in the center of the sphere, essentially the soul of the sphere, you might say. And everything that rotates inevitably creates that center. The center is, there's always a center of rotation of any object. It doesn't have to be a perfect sphere. It could be a cube. A cube rotating still has a center of rotation. So that center, that's like the essence of the or the core soul point, the core principal point of the rotating object. In science, it's also called the center of gravity. It's the point where you make your measurements from. It's an imaginary point in physics where you would tend to use as the fulcrum point of your measurements for different things, maybe anything from measuring the inertia to measuring the velocities and various curvatures of travel and this kind of thing.
It's Mark. Just on observation, it looks like a plane where when it goes through and breaks the sound barrier.
Ah, yes, right.
At that point where you have that cone forming and so on, you have a point in, like when you were shifting the speeds, you have a point of instability in the plane, and then it smooths out again.
Right,
once
exactly.
you're past it. So
yes,
it seems to do that.
You get that with race cars as well at high speeds. You go through certain transitions that there's vibrations and so on, then all of a sudden it smooths out. We get that quite a bit with this with rotating spheres. There'll be usually 2 or 3 ranges. If you go like from 0 to 10,000 RPM, there'll usually be 2 or 3 ranges where the thing's just vibrating like crazy, and it's just a natural harmonics. You can't really design it out very easily. You can try to remove the variables in the in and out of the sphere and the shaking of it and that kind of thing, but there's just certain points where it gets noisy, and it'll even be hard to increase the RPM to the next level because it reaches like a barrier in RPM, and it just, you have to keep adding more and more power to get it to pass by that vibration barrier. And once it does, then it smooths out again, and it's just like it never happened. It's a very strange phenomenon. Florian says, is the reaction in the bubble a cold nuclear fusion? Doug says, even a tiny plasma creates a sphere around itself. the reaction in the bubble is in an ideal circumstance, that would be something that I would work toward. Actually, that is basically my goal with this whole bubble thing, is to create essentially a fusion reaction inside of this sphere using this tiny little bubble, which essentially is in a vacuum condition inside the liquid. It's no longer under the same atmospheric pressures as it was when it was part of a gas or part of the innards of this thing if it didn't have all the water inside of it. So the idea is that, for example, in sonoluminescence, it's called, sono meaning sound and luminescence meaning light. You can use sound to create light through sonoluminescence. So basically you use like a ultrasonic kind of sound generator, and you put it in water and crank it up, and it generates tiny little bubbles, and these bubbles can be suspended much in the way that this bubble that we see on the screen is suspended. And the idea then is you can actually pulsate the bubble at a certain frequency, usually around 20 to 24,000 hertz, 20 to 24,000 cycles per second. And the bubble will start resonating and pulsating, and when the bubble collapses, because it's a vapor bubble and it's expanding and contracting at many thousands of times per second, you can actually get, when the bubble collapses, it gives off energy, and it can collapse at such a rapid rate that it gives off a nuclear energy, like it gives off a high temperature, they say nuclear reaction. So basically the implosion of the gas in the bubble creates a spike of energy, and they use a similar process called implosion for the latest torpedoes for boats, believe it or not. So you'd have a torpedo that creates a bubble like we see here, a large bubble underneath a ship, say, and the bubble, first it expands inside the water like a normal explosion, but it's set up so that when the bubble collapses, it gives off this enormous energy spike that goes straight up against gravity. So it's like a spike that's able to, when it's in the case of a torpedo underneath a boat, that spike will come up from the implosion and cut the ship right in half. And this is something new that they've discovered in, I think, the last couple of decades, basically, for that this implosion reaction is so powerful. It's hard to comprehend. And in the case of a tiny little bubble, much smaller than this bubble, operating under a ultrasonic kind of frequency, you can generate light with it, and you can actually see the light with your naked eye. And it's a pretty neat process. I've started to play with that and try to set up the apparatus for that. I have a couple of ultrasonic and other kinds of speakers that I was working with and so on. I haven't had good results yet because it takes the correct apparatus and a certain power range that you have to be in so on in order for it to manifest. But hopefully one day you'll see me playing around with a device that makes light from water, from bubbles, from essentially the steam bubbles inside the water.
Well, that collapsing and expansion, I was thinking of Dan Winter's video that Mr. Keshe had played about where it collapses and then expands, and he was saying how that a perfect collapse and a perfect expansion, you come out with a perfect distribution of energy. And that thing keeps going back and forth like an accordion.
Yes, right. That's a good point. Dan Winters has some interesting concepts that very much involved with this. He talks about the compression of the, or what is it called? Not the compression of the waveform, but the collapse of the waveform. And that's when the energy is given off, actually, is during the collapse. So you think about it, other examples of that might be in automotive, for example, you have an ignition coil, and that ignition coil has a magnetic field in it through the coil of copper wire, and you put electricity into that coil and it generates a magnetic field, and you think that that magnetic field would create a spark at the spark plug, but it's not the creation of the magnetic field that creates the spark. It's the collapse of the magnetic field that creates the spark. So you collapse the field in the old cars by a point system. The points ground the system and cause the magnetic field to collapse, and every time it collapses it sends out this huge pulse, which is enough to jump a 1-inch gap of between two electrodes, for example. Or in the case of a spark plug under high pressure, it's able to spark the spark plug even though there's pressure in that condition.
Yeah, I'm not promoting Dan Winter because Mr. Keshe said he didn't really explain the plasma at all. He just made it fit to his own internal thinking, so to speak.
Yeah, I just let people form their own opinion of Dan Winters. I think personally, I think he has lots of interesting and valuable things to offer. Some great pictures, for example, great, concepts, and he's made devices and so on as well. And he's actually one of the most prolific science teachers in the world, and that's part of his gig. But
right, he's a leader in his field. Yeah,
and
but I was impressed with. Well, sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, when he was talking about Ingo Swann, and you know who that is, right?
I can't say I do offhand, no.
But anyway, how he had created a flame in front of him, where he did some sort of, I think he had a book, Penetration, and he did some of the remote viewing in California at some of these labs with some agencies and stuff. And Dan was saying how he could create a flame in front of him, like, I don't know if it was a cold flame or what, and they thought he was doing it with electromagnetically, so they put a Faraday cage around him, and he still did it. So it wasn't electromagnetic. It was probably plasma, but he could create this flame somehow.
Yeah,
just in midair.
Has talked about how to create the plasma with your hands. That was one of the workshops a couple of years ago now, I think. And Caroline also talked about that. That was some of her initial workshops, probably in the private teaching, actually. I think she explained all about how to generate the plasma ball. Mr. Keshe has talked about it in a previous workshop, how to create that plasma ball between our hands and actually manifest these fields.
I think he was projecting it like so far away from his body, and just as I understood it, but very impressive. And I know that the guy was for real. I'm pretty sure. I've looked at some of his teachings there.
Yeah, and I know there's others that have participated in that remote viewing program back in the 60s, for example, and that was part of the work that they would do would be exercises like that to create effects. Kept the supervisors on their toes, and the military was trying to weaponize the remote viewing, and so the remote viewers actually got together and decided as a class that when they were asked the question, can you kill someone remotely with your techniques, they would always say, no, it's not possible to do that. You can't do anything to harm others. But they knew that it was actually possible to do. It's just they would never do it because karmically it was very destructive to yourself to do such a thing, to harm someone else, especially through such powers. It's considered a real no-no. For those who know and are versed with such things, they consider it a no-no to even show off such powers. It's part of the ego wanting to get verification of its existence, basically. To kind of show off that kind of thing. So some of the maybe the young shamans and priests and so on might do those what's called parlor tricks like that in order to impress people or to gain followers or to create a legacy or to more likely make money and that kind of thing. Whereas ethically it's okay to do in the sense of simply proving to oneself a demonstration that you know how to control the fields. That's what it's all about. It's just showing the knowledge.
And that movie that came out, not that I go to movies or anything, and I didn't see it, The Man Who Stared at Goats or something? It was a takeoff on something like that.
Yeah, I believe it was about the remote viewing program with the CIA and so on. The various agencies had various programs. What's it called? The ASA or something, the Army Secret Intelligence or something like that, had one of the remote viewing programs, and then a different agency had a different program in the 1980s. I think they still do have some work going on with that stuff.
Of course.
And if it's successful, then you really don't hear about it.
Of course. But the thing with shamans too, everybody thinks of a shaman as a healer, but apparently they also have the ability to kill, which thou shalt not kill, right? Using magic.
Well, some of them have been paid to increase someone's love life, to guarantee that some individual gets attracted to you so that you can fulfill your desires that way and all that kind of thing. Or some people might want to hire a so-called shaman to protect them or to help them deal with some situation or some person that's irritating them. But generally those kind of shamans that respond to those types of trivial kind of uses don't generally do so well in terms of the longevity of themselves and their clients, because inevitably some sort of karmic stuff gets involved. It's very hard to keep yourself separate when you're out busy killing people and interfering rather with people's lives in that way. Trying to influence others, trying to that's what advertising is all about, basically, is influencing groups of people. So probably being a advertiser, especially if you don't particularly have ethics behind you, it may not be a job that you'd want to have in terms of dragging all that baggage around with you from creating havoc in people's lives and that kind of thing. Okay, anything else, or should we wrap things up here now? We've gone about over 2.5 hours. Maybe that's all we need for tonight. Sometimes we go longer, sometimes we go shorter.
Hello, Rick.
Yes, hello.
Hey,
Is that Thomas?
Yeah, how's it going?
Good. Did you have something you wanted
I'm
to
sorry.
show?
Yeah, I think I've been working on some 3D printed reactors, and I had 2 going off, and one just finished. So unfortunately, one is about another half hour until it's done. So I can't cut off that background noise. Is it all right?
Yeah, it's not bad. I wondered what that was. I thought you meant like paper printers. You're talking about 3D printers you have going in the background, correct?
Yeah, 3D printed. Yeah, 3D printers with reactors is kind of like a match made in heaven.
So what materials are you using for your printing?
Well, the standard is just PLA and ABS, but it's kind of tricky because of the little cracks that happen between the layering. So you have to be really precise with the layer height and how thick the walls are to actually have the cores completely sealed, because it might be all right at 2000 RPM, but if you pick it up to like 6000, you could feel and see some of the liquid coming out. So but there's actually a PET filament, which is the atomic hydrogen producing plastic that we use in the Coca-Cola style reactors. That's the the ones that release off the hydrogen. So I haven't printed with that just yet, but I do have a roll of that, so that'll be kind of cool to get that going and have just hydrogen producing in the core itself. So that's pretty cool.
What about can you print in polycarbonate yet, or is that too difficult?
That's next on my shopping list, but at the moment I do not have that. I just stuck to PLA, ABS, PETG, and some I have this iron-filled magnetic PLA too. So but it's a lot of fiddling around trying to get the right settings for everything. But I was actually thinking for some of the old style Keshe reactors that are really big. And he mentioned that the reactor's diameter was 21 centimeters, and that's the wavelength of hydrogen.
Yes, I remember something about that. That's interesting, yes.
Yeah, he explained the flight system was a single core flight system utilized that diameter, and it was filled with a composite, I believe, GANs, and it was bismuth. He was after the field of 115, and he used, I think, bismuth with potassium and another salt. He didn't mention what the other salt was, but he said that he had made a few of these single core reactors, and it was a 21 centimeter diameter, and the atomic hydrogen wavelength, he said, was for universal travel. So I was going to use polycarbonate for that size because of its strength, and you would just you need something substantial to be spinning that big. So I have a sewing machine motor. It's a 10th horsepower motor.
10 horsepower sewing machine. Wow.
A 10th horsepower.
Oh, 10th horsepower. Okay, yes. I thought you said 10 horsepower.
So it goes. It's pretty big. It weighs maybe like 5 pounds, and I guess maybe it was for an industrial size sewing machine. But anyways, it spins up to 10,000 RPM, so I think that should be good enough. So unfortunately, I don't think I could print the whole housing structure out of plastic. I don't know if it would hold that kind of vibration. So we'll see.
Yeah, it gets tricky in the higher RPMs with that kind of arrangement.
But I wanted to show the dual core. I kind of got down pat.
Mm-hmm. You want to share right now?
It could be for a later date, but it just will be a quick video. But
okay. You want to share your live video then?
Yeah. Just 1 sec here. Is that working?
Let me get you pinned here, as they call it.
Sorry?
Let me get you pinned and spotlighted here. Just a second.
Hi.
There we go. Okay, yeah, we got you on there now.
So there's one printing at the moment.
Oh, yes.
So it's almost done there. And I got one spinning in the background, but I'll bring it closer to you guys.
So this is a 2-core reactor you're talking about, eh? So that's
it's a dynamic reactor. So I got 2 spheres spinning in opposing directions.
Okay, yeah.
Which I've never felt before until a couple days ago, and it really does make a difference when you have not the floating core. So I've done that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really it's just a tremendous amount of energy. When I had this thing going on, I couldn't sleep till 9 in the morning. It just it was just incredible. The outside is filled with a CH3, and on the inside it's with I used a heavy composite GANs. It was made out of gold and ocean water, so it has quite the field, and really excited to get 3 of these going, because if one produced that amount of energy, I can only imagine what 3 of these in a room
right.
could do.
Well, with 3, then you have the opportunity to create what's called the free plasma in the center of the 3, right?
Yeah.
From the interaction of the fields.
So does that free plasma ever change or move? Is it once it's created, does it remain?
Well, the control of that free plasma is what is the spaceship control system is all about, basically. So you can control it. Um, like if you had three balls, your free plasma would be in the center of the three balls, and you couldn't really control it as such. But if you had a fourth ball, the fourth ball will control the vertical height of the plasma, you could say. So once you've established that free plasma with three entities, then a fourth one allows you the control of that free plasma. So you're using plasma to create the free plasma, and then you're using free plasma to control that free plasma as well. So it gets to be a bit of a tricky deal there, you might say, but it makes sense in a way. It's like your two-core reactor has an opportunity to create a free plasma, but it won't. It'll interact with your plasma. You feel the energy and so on, for example, but it doesn't necessarily have the control system built into it to have a directional control and so on. You might be able to have like an up and down control by just sheer force.
But once you create it, or you attract those fields to it, and you create that that singularity, that free plasma, it really wouldn't go away. I guess once you take the reactors away, maybe it might find its position somewhere else. But when you have those reactors in there, you're creating the condition. You're finding it's you attract that, you create it, and then you could control the positioning with it with the fourth reactor. But once you take those reactors away, I guess it would just move, right?
Yes, depending on, it'll always find its plasma will always find its position, its positive positioning, depending on the environment. And so you might be able to create a free plasma, remove the reactors, and still have a free plasma. It may be possible, but you still have to create the conditions to have that continue. Like it would have to be self-energizing in some way rather than created from outside. And if you stop your motors in your reactor, for example, is that going to stop the free plasma? Because if it's tied to the matter level stuff, then if the motor stops, then the free plasma stops. But if you can tie it to, rather than the matter level, to the plasma itself, so that you can bypass the matter level and work with the plasma directly and create the free plasma from the plasma and other free plasmas from the free plasmas and so on and so forth. You start to work directly with the fields rather than the physicality would be the ultimate goal.
Well, you create the free plasma out of the fields, but what's the actual structure of the free plasma? Is it on the same level of the soul? And from what I gathered through the teachings, that's kind of what I'm
well, if you had three reactors, for example, then the center point of those three, that free plasma, that would be the soul of that setup. Soul just means center.
Yeah, the soul would never die. Souls don't die. They just kind of move to their next journey, their next destiny. So
it depends how you look at it in a way. Like, for example, let's when you create a vortex in a bathtub, does the vortex die when you stop spinning it, or if you or what happens to it? Like, or say you create two vortexes in a bathtub. I did that experiment a few weeks ago and showed everybody in my bathtub cam. And so I created two spiral vortexes, two of them that were going in the same direction, and then two of them counter-rotating beside each other, and it was quite interesting to see the results of that. So you can use lighting to see that the vortex is still going 5 minutes after you create these vortexes. You can see the shadows of the vortex. It'll be like a black spot on the bottom of the bathtub when you have light going through. And so these vortexes, they're still alive, they're still working, but they're dissipating. They're finding their position. They may be dissipating their energies because another vortex is sucking them up, or they're, you know, interacting with all these other bits and pieces, and it may be dissipating that plasma of that vortex, let's say, in a bathtub. Or if in the case of when you pull the plug and you've got a flow happening that's able to keep that vortex going. And if you could keep the water going into the tub, that vortex would go virtually forever as long as it kept draining out through the drain hole, right? So you create the conditions then to have a continuous vortex. And maybe that reactor you have in your hand, that you can create the conditions that allows it to rotate without requiring the electricity to go into the motors to cause the rotation. And that would be the ultimate way to go about it, is to find a way to create the rotation the way nature does it without having to use motors.
One more show and tell, and this is
what do we have here? Yes,
the behemoth I was working on, and I'm still gonna fire it up. And this was all handmade. I individually wrapped all those windings, those coils, and that's an inch glass shaft.
Really?
I guess they're used in glass blowing, so these are actually really cheap. I think it was like $3 for foot, and actually just a solid shaft. I have a
solid
oh,
shaft.
sorry, no, it is
hollow.
a solid shaft, but it's hollow. So this is a 2-core at the moment, and these are the cores I'm working with. I create a little threaded coupler, so that threads onto that shaft there. And this thing, it's pretty light. Most of the weight is actually just in the glass shaft, and it stayed dead straight for the most part. But
you have a bearing in the middle there, where
there's
on the glass shaft.
There's a ceramic, a really thin ceramic bearing, and ceramics are just great. So
we've got a few of them. Super expensive, but handy.
Yeah, on Alibaba, I think it was $10 for one. So yeah,
they can go up to $100 or $200 pretty easily too.
Yeah, I'll just show you how the core is comprised of. It's a little tricky getting a threaded plastic core to actually seal right. But I got lucky, and I found a really nice silicone gasket. They're they do the trick actually. They're about maybe 5 millimeters thick, and that does it. So
you can see. I'll just briefly show mine here. There's an O-ring. You can see the O-ring inside here. It's a thin little black one. And I found that when I first put these together, they did tend to leak. And so I used some special grease that I have. It's called vacuum grease for vacuum systems. They use it for the O-rings and that for vacuum systems. It's like a silicone grease basically. And I put just a very thin layer of that on the O-ring and the threads of the unit. And then when it threaded together, I could cinch it down nicely, and it was leak free after that.
That's a nice core. Where did you get that one?
I got this from the guys in Arizona at the Keshe Foundation USA, and you can buy the whole kit there. It comes with these hard drive motors that look like this, and with the adapter. This is an adapter here in the top, and you can see it has a hole inside, 10mm hole. And what it has is there's 3 set screws around here. Use an Allen key to lock in the set screws against the. This has a nice kind of shaft machined at the bottom that goes into your 10mm hole, and you tighten down the set screws and you're good to go. The other option with this is Jay wanted to know about this as well. He had a question. This comes with the single, you can get the single reactor or the 4-core reactor setup, Starship configuration. The single one comes with this cup. Instead of a sphere like this, you get this aluminum adapter cup, which goes into the 10mm hole. And then you glue on a sphere, a bigger sphere than this actually, that comes with it. It's almost double that size, but it's smaller than this one, so there's a lot less stress on the bearings of the motor with the smaller sphere. And you just glue the sphere onto that curved aluminum adapter. But being that the spheres are acrylic, it's not even worth doing really, because they have a tendency to just totally shatter and fracture at the least moment's notice. So buyer beware and be careful with acrylic as far as rotating at high speeds. They're fine 1,000, 2,000 RPM. You get up over 5,000 or 6,000. Then the minutes are limited in terms of running minutes that you get away with. Might be fine for the first hours, minutes, or whatever, and then all of a sudden a stress crack will develop in these acrylic containers. They're very fragile. Like, I could squish this with 2 fingers and just shatter it with my fingers, and sharp shards would go shooting all over the place. Whereas the polycarbonate, I could take this polycarbonate sphere, and usually I could literally use it like a baseball, and take a baseball bat and whack it with it, and it wouldn't even phase it. I've done the experiments with that with a square box that I made out of polycarbonate, 1/4-inch polycarbonate sheets. I took a ball peen, my favorite ball peen hammer, and hit it as hard as I could several times, and could not crack it, could not dent. I actually dented it a little bit, but I could not crack it out of polycarbonate. It's so tough. You can also look at videos on the internet with the difference between polycarbonate and acrylic sheets, and it shows somebody shooting a 22 gun at the acrylic sheet, and it just shatters it instantly. And he shoots it at the polycarbonate sheet, and it actually doesn't go through the sheet. And eventually he gets out a shotgun and blasts the heck out of the acrylic, and again the shotgun won't even penetrate the polycarbonate sheet. It has about somewhere around 50 to 100 times more strength than the acrylic. So it's really worthwhile to pay extra for the polycarbonate for such experiments.
Yeah, that's a great option. It's super clear too. Do you have a double core for that setup?
No, there's double core in terms of, or even triple core in terms of the free floating ones that you mentioned inside, but not with the pinned core. There's a different model that Armin has shown before, made out of copper, brass, and sometimes acrylic as well. And there is a center pin in that one, and the inner sphere kind of fits over the pin, and it keeps it in place so it doesn't get lopsided. It's quite easily the inner sphere will go to one side of the it'll tend to be lopsided in one side or another, and when this thing gets rotating, it gets off balance by that sphere inside because it tends to want to go to the outside.
So that's they're both connected. The two cores are connected on through the center pin. You're saying so they're all spinning in the same direction.
Yeah, that would be the case with the center pin one with the unpowered center pin. Yes, you have to have the two-core system with two powered systems and the bearings and seals that go along with that whole more complex system if you want to do it that way.
That's what I was wondering. To do a double dynamic, you would need some sort of what do they call it? A radial seal, radial shaft seal, or something like that. And
yeah,
I'm wondering,
we looked that up in the old days, because by old days I mean a few years ago when we were looking at building Keshe reactors that were the gaseous kind, not the GANs, but the gas. And so all the seals had to be gas sealed, so it wouldn't allow any leakage. And that's very difficult to do with these kinds of systems. It doesn't take much of a leak to destroy a pure vacuum condition.
yeah. Have you experimented with, I guess, the old style and the new style, like mixing the two, a gas and a GANS reactor?
Only done limited amounts of gas experiments. I've used argon and CO2 and just atmospheric gases and that kind of thing.
I mean, mixing the two, like having a GANS reactor and then being gas inside the GANS reactor.
Well, I have put, like for example, in this one has GANS water inside, but it also has a bubble in there.
Yeah.
So in effect, that bubble is controllable. I mean, there's a little screw stopper kind of thing in there, and what I've done is I can take the stopper out, the little brass screw, and I put a septaseal. It's called a septaseal, a little rubber kind of seal that can go in there, and then I can use a syringe to be able to stick into this while it's rotating to be able to take out or put in gases or other substances that I'd like to put in as well. So you could, for example, when this is rotating, you might want to inject it with some GANs of a different kind than the kind that's spinning in it, to see what happens with that. See if you can create double layers of the GANSes inside without having to have separate cores for it and that kind of thing.
That's what I was thinking, just having a controlled air pocket. I guess you could have a separate core, but just inject it with a gas, and that would that be in the GANS state then, if it was inside the reactor?
What would the bubble be in a GANS state, or the?
Yeah, whatever you inject the gas into inside the reactor.
I'm not sure if it would change into a GANS state necessarily automatically. We know that matter level stuff, when we eat it, will tend to create a GANS state of that substance in our bodies. But I'm not sure if the actual bubble would turn into a GANS state from the substances. We'd have to look at that a bit closer, I think.
Well, when we spin the reactors, we already get that air bubble created, and that's the principal fields, and that's in a different state altogether.
Yeah, good point. Definitely some strange, miraculous things happen when we spin things like this. It's the more you look at spin and how it works is quite a miracle, quite a you know, like inertia, for example. If you were to throw this as is, you have a certain weight to it. You could pretty much guarantee that you could throw it a certain distance and so on. If this was spinning at a high speed and you were able to grab it and throw it, if it was really traveling at high speed, it would be almost impossible to throw. It would be so heavy. It would feel so heavy. Even though if you were to put it on a scale, it would weigh exactly the same. But it's the experience of it is like, oh, I can barely move this thing.
Because it's a, I guess it's a type of friction almost. So it's like a mass friction. But it's interesting you bring that up, because what I was wondering, and I had an idea of, and it was using that principle, having two motions tied together. So if you think like the galaxy spinning, but within that galaxy, the solar system is spinning. So you're having two rotational movements attached.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what I was planning on doing is actually attaching the plate with 3 reactors and having the power source attached to that plate and spinning that plate. I'm going to try different flows, but having it spin and having those reactors sitting on it spin counter or whatever way. So yeah, same as a gyroscope.
Right. Well, I've got, speaking,
I don't know, have you
spinners,
tried that out?
Well, I've got sort of that idea here with a spinner.
Oh, cool.
I took I'll show you the components here. This is one of those fidget spinners. Yeah. You know, you put it like this and you spin it basically. But I put three GANS balls on it, and it's kind of special. These GANS balls have little screws in the bottom that I can take out with an O-ring on them and a washer, and I can fill the GANS balls with whatever substance I wish to through the bottom here. Then I've glued on this Velcro circle here on top and bottom, and I put a Velcro strip on this ball here, for example, and now I can just stick that on there, and it stays more or less in place, and it becomes a spinner. And you know, would it charge the water in the spheres, for example, or would it have some other effect? Quite possibly. And then I've got a GANS ball. This one doesn't have GANS in it right now, but the idea is a GANS ball. Again, I put a Velcro sticker on it, and I can put that right in the center there. And now I've got these 3 balls are essentially creating a free plasma in the center, which is part of the interaction with this ping pong ball of GANS here. So we actually have several different interactions going on at the same time.
So what I was thinking was attaching little tiny motors to those 3 ones you have on the fidget spinner. So getting that.
Yep, I already thought of that too. And what I've done is, I don't have it here, but I've actually hooked up, it's pretty funky, but if you can imagine, I've hooked up an elastic band that goes, or O-ring that goes around these 3. So when you spin one of these all spin, by the way. You spin one, then they all spin, right? Because they're connected with a belt. Yep. And then I had a little electric motor. In fact, you can use a Dremel tool or other kind of electric motor, and you can stick the shaft here and just put a little bit of tension on it, and you get this belt whipping around. You can get these things going up to 10,000 RPM or more if you wanted to. and so you can kind of like get them going. You get these little balls spinning fast enough, and they start to form what's called a Gans ring. So it's we saw that a little bit in my video of the hole in the middle video. It forms like a ring around the circumference here, or a series of rings actually, usually. And if you're careful and spin these up and then spin it down gently, the Gans ring will actually stay there even when the spheres come to a rest. So in effect, you're sort of incorporating these rings as a the energy in the fields of these rings are in a preset mode that shows up at high speeds, but when you lower the speeds down and even stop it, it keeps that same configuration as if it was a dynamically running ring. So it's kind of an interesting idea that way.
Thanks for sharing. I don't mean to keep you guys up. I was unfortunately busy for the last 2 hours, so I'll join you next week, and I'll show off a few more things.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it very much. I like your stuff there. It's nice to see.
Well, thanks. Cheers.
Okay. Okay, any more for show and tell today? Any more questions or anything? Or shall we wrap it up here? I think I will wrap it up. I'm a pretty tired puppy here right now, so might be a good idea to allow me to have some rest. Okay, so sounds good. Thanks for contributing today, people. And let's work toward coming up with more projects and things that we can incorporate the ideas of the Keshe, or the what we call sometimes the plasma technology, or the plasma science as it's known as. So, Mr. Keshe would like to see people do scientific papers and contribute them. There's a new Keshe Foundation journal now that is being set up and is in process, and people can contribute to this journal and have your results published, and without having the peer pressure and having the necessity of the peer system, which has never really worked all that well with science. Anyway, that's one of the things going on. And stay tuned for the Knowledge Seekers Workshop coming up on Thursday at 9 a.m. Central European Time, which I believe will be 1 a.m. in this case Pacific Time. So you have to figure out your own times. It's that weird time of year where the daylight savings time changed in North America, but not for Europe. So now we have to wait for a couple of weeks for Europe to catch up to the daylight savings time, so we're all on the same difference of hours that we were before. So it all gets quite confusing for twice a year while we all figure out why we even started daylight savings time to start with. Anyway, yeah, go ahead, Jalal. Hello.
Hi. Your devices. This is the compass. What you have, the new one. Mm-hmm. Can you take one of them? Can you take the upper of one of them and dip it in CO2 water?
Just
not all of it.
Take one of these and dip it in CO2 water.
Yeah, not all. One one part of it, one side,
one end, yeah.
one end, and put beneath this the whole pyramid nano-coated copper. If is it plate or
You mean inside of here?
no. Leave this one above nano-coated copper. Then you will have what do you call it? Controlled environment without interference of any magnetic fields of the table or earth.
Where would the copper go again?
Put this one in your hand. Put it above.
Wrap the wire coil around this way?
No. Just do you have nano-coated copper plate?
I do have one handy here.
Okay, this is nano-coated. Okay, put it down. Put this one above what you have. Yeah. Now you tried with your hand, with your ball, with anything you want, and then take the same part and dip it in CO2 water, one end of it, leave it a little bit, let it dry in it, and then you bring your hand, your CO2 balls or anything, and you will see different thing. I think, well, what I noticed that with my hand.
Okay, that's a good experiment to do, Jalal. I'll try to remember to get that lined up for next week.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the suggestion.
I done that with the paper, with the in a closed environment, and it did function, did work.
Okay, good. Thank you. Alrighty, gonna wrap things up here then. Okay, thanks everybody. Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for what's now Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. As we go marching on through this new year. Can't believe it's almost April already. Amazing, amazing. Okay, well, stay tuned, like I said, to the Knowledge Seekers Workshop. Guaranteed there'll be some interesting topics come up this time around. And we'll see you back here at the Plasma Reactor Group for next week's session, hopefully. Okay, this is Rick signing out for Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. Take care, see you next time around. Okay, I'm going to stop the broadcast.